Welcome to our value trail bike head-to-head test. We've got 5 trail bikes, all with pretty similar geometry and travel numbers, but most importantly, all costing less than $3,000. I'm here with Ethan and Trevor. We're in Bend, Oregon, where we've got lots of great trails for trail bikes, and we've been riding these bikes back to back over the last couple weeks. The first bike that we're looking at is the Rocky Mountain Instinct A10. The Instinct A10 lists for $2,899 and weighs 36.2 pounds. That's the heaviest of the 5 bikes we have on test. For that, you get 140 millimeters of travel in the back with a 150 millimeter fork. You also get quite a bit of geometry adjustments, but in the neutral setting, you get a 64-degree head tube angle with a 480 millimeter reach in the size large, paired with some 440 millimeter chainstays and a 1258 millimeter wheelbase. So, guys, what'd you think of the Rocky Mountain?
I really like the way it rode. I like the frame. The frame is really well thought out.
It is.
Rocky Mountain is a brand that has been refining their bikes for years.
Yeah.
This one was really comfortable to me. However, the component spec didn't keep up to it, but even though the build wasn't our favorite, the bike actually performed pretty dang well.
Right. It did.
And I think it's just due to the refinements that Rocky Mountain's done to it. We actually didn't even play with any of the flip chip adjustments.
I actually went and messed with the Ride 4, so this has it's the evolution of the Ride 9, it's now the Ride 4.
Okay.
And I went and did some extra credit laps on it, and we've had it in the, where I set it back to is the 3rd position, which is their neutral setting. And then they've got a steeper setting, and then they have 2 slacker settings. I think one maybe messes with the kinematics. I can't remember exactly, but I put it in the steeper setting and the slacker setting. And I'm not the best at noticing, you know, half a degree here and there. It wasn't super noticeable.
Okay.
But I did really like the geometry. I mean, it was the slackest bike on test with that 64-degree head tube angle. It still felt pretty well rounded and not overly aggressive. And it fit well too. I mean, like you said, Trevor, it was comfortable and easy to just hop on and ride.
Another cool adjustment thing that the Rocky Mountain had that none of the other bikes in our field had to offer was an adjustable headset.
Yeah.
You could change the reach by 5 millimeters.
By 5 millimeters, yeah.
We didn't do any of that, but it is really unique and neat.
Yeah. Something we didn't mention earlier, it also has a UDH compatible rear end, integrated chain guide, and then IACG tabs as well. So it's really got all those touch points that you'd want.
It's got some good protection on the bottom. It's gonna be quiet, so you can
really good chainstay protector too. One of the
protection as well.
Is there some on the seat stay as well?
Negative.
Yep.
Oh,
a little bit.
Perfect.
Yeah. Where it matters.
Yeah.
So again, Rocky's stuff is really well thought out. But like Trevor said, the component spec leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, just the suspension and the brakes really let this bike down.
I think the suspension and the brakes were the low point. It's got a RockShox Recon fork with a 150 millimeter travel. I think the Recon's fine on a, you know, entry level 120, 130 millimeter hardtail, but you're pushing the limit of that fork when you try to run 150 millimeters. And, you know, we put collectively maybe, you know, 50 miles on this bike and didn't run into serious issues, but I think that would be a fail point relatively early on. I think you're just asking too much out of that fork on this bike. And then the Tektro HDM 275 brakes, which are 2-piston resin pads, not enough power for this bike.
Nope. I really actually enjoyed the dissectors. I think that's a great choice for this bike. The Shimano Q stuff worked as it should. Shimano does their entry-level stuff really well.
Yeah.
It's 11 speed, which I think this is the only 11 speed on the test.
I think it's 11 and 52th range, which is like the same as the NX that we have.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. I think, you know, I think as long as you get the range and not so much the actual like 12 speed, you know, I would reckon
bigger
even
gaps between the gears, but you know, you're not going to notice that on trail riding.
Not that much. Yeah, especially if this is your first bike.
Yeah.
And for the most part too, is like we keep saying first bike for a lot of people. A lot of people are coming from like their 2008 Gary Fisher or their Specialized Hard Rock or something. And now you're looking at a full suspension bike.
Yeah,
this thing is still light years above your old rock hopper.
And this one's interesting comparing this to some of the other bikes. The one that comes to mind is Polygon, where this frame is leagues above, and this frame is spec'd on bikes that cost twice as much as this, whereas the Polygon that we'll be talking about in another video is the highest end bike. And so with this, you have 3 different geometry adjustments. You can adjust the head tube angle by half a degree in either direction. You mentioned the reach, chainstay adjustment, and if you put that in the high setting and the short chainstay, you can run it mullet. So you're getting a ton of adjustability, and like of all the bikes, if I were to slap another couple $1,000s into it, I'd probably choose this one. But people who are looking to buy a $3,000 bike usually aren't planning to throw a couple $1,000s into it.
They've already spent all their money.
That's their limit. That's why they're buying this bike, because it's a value product, and I think the value's just, it's more incorporated in the frame.
Yeah.
So you're missing out on the components, and it kind of seems to me like Rocky was trying to, okay, we want a sub $3,000 bike. This is the frame that makes the most sense. Let's just put it out. Whereas I think they really designed this frame to be a much more performance-oriented, high-end alloy frame.
Right.
And then, you know, product managers had to just slap some parts on to get it under the price point. And
Absolutely.
I do think more so than any other bike that we've tested here with this Instinct A10, you kind of got to go up to the next model if you want to have a bike out of the box that can really live up to its full potential.
Right. I know what Rocky Mountain is capable of, and while they haven't been a big value player in the value field, if this is their first entry, I think they can do better.
Yeah, sure. And kudos to them for bringing a bike to the market that's in this price category. That's something that we can't say about Transition or Santa Cruz or other brands that are known for more high-end brands bikes. But I think that, again, kind of like I said earlier, my kind of takeaway with this bike is if you want an Instinct, you need to pay more than $3,000.
I agree.
Whether that's getting this and making some upgrades, you know, within your first year or so, or just, you know, going up to the A30 or something like that. Got to pay a little more for it.
A little bit more, which is fine. Like, Rocky Mountain is a premium brand.
Yeah. We've actually got 2 brands that are sold in bike shops, this and an Ibis we're going to be talking about later on, and then 3 bikes that are direct to consumer. And so that's another cool kind of value that's incorporated into this bike, is that there's a lot. Rocky Mountain dealers are pretty common. You've probably got one within an hour radius of you, so you can test ride this bike. If you ever run into an issue, you can bring it there and they'll know how to fix it for you and be able to get it going again. And so that's another thing that Rocky has going for it.
That's another great point, is like with the other bikes that are in our shootout, you can't test ride them first.
Yeah.
You can only take our word for it, or somebody else who rides it, Fabio Widmer or Sam Pilgrim, you know, the guys that are pushing those things to the limits.
So let's talk about who we would recommend this bike for. I mean, we've already talked a little bit about, you know, some of the component stuff. Is there a particular type of rider that you think would maybe be better suited with a really high-end frame, probably the best frame of the bunch, but some lower quality components?
I'd say it'd be for that guy who, I'd say budget is the wrong word. It's the guy who wants to get into, or gal, who wants to get into trail riding and knows that they're ambitious enough to keep it up for a few years, to the point that, this is all they have in their budget. Is like, all they have is $3,000 now, but next year they might have another $1,000 to throw at it. It gives you that opportunity to upgrade things slowly and perfectly.
Make it
where,
exactly how you want.
If you want better brakes, you can do that. If you feel like the brakes even hold you back in the first place, they might hold you back at 210, but for me at 140, they work out pretty well.
And that's kind of, that's who I was going to bring up of who I think this bike could be for, and that's like a Grob. So a kid who's, you know, maybe weighs, you know, $120 or something like that, where having a slightly undergun fork and less powerful brakes isn't going to be as big of a deal. They're probably going to be a little bit harder on their equipment anyway, so maybe they don't want to have a, you know, performance elite fork and they're going to scratch the stanchion and lose a lot of money. This kind of makes sense. It's mullet compatible. You could put a smaller wheel on it. So if I was looking to get a bike for a kid as like kind of a do-it-all, I mean, it's got 150 mils of travel front. You could in theory probably use this as a bike park bike, but you could go on a trail ride. I feel like the geometry in the neutral setting that we tested on made it one of the more playful and poppy bikes, but you'd have the ability to change it up if you wanted to. And I could see for a kid, you know, as they're trying out different disciplines, it could change with them. And I think for a kid, it makes a lot of sense.
That is a really good point, especially kids or even beginners too.
Yeah, smaller riders.
You smash one of these derailleurs, it's a fraction of a price of a GX derailleur.
Yeah. But I do wish the components were better, but I think overall you're buying this bike for mostly the frame.
Yep, that's a good way to think about it. You're buying it for the frame. And the next bike that we're gonna be talking about couldn't be more different. That's the Polygon Siskiyou T9 that sees some pretty dang nice components, but the frame doesn't really hold a candle to this. So make sure you come back and check that out. Till then, remember that bikes are for everybody. Have fun out there. Welcome to our value trailback.
Value trailback.
Trailback in it now.
Yeah, brother.
Welcome to our value trail back.
Oh my God. Back to back.